hosts and guests on Everything's Messy podcast are not licensed healthcare professionals. The discussions in our episodes are not personalized medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare provider for medical guidance. Never delay seeking professional medical advice or emergency assistance because of our podcast. We encourage consulting with a healthcare professional before making any significant health changes. By listening to our podcast, you agree to the disclaimer. Thank you for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. Hey, welcome to Everything's Messy podcast, where we celebrate the beautiful but messy life experiences that most, if not all, people go through. Get ready to embark on an exciting journey through the raw and unfiltered stories of everyday people. Here, we dive into messy realities of life, from making messy mistakes to triumphs and everything in between. Are you sensing a theme? That's right, it's messy. But this just isn't about the mess. It's about finding strength and resilience in the midst of it all. We'll explore how health, fitness, and wellness play a crucial role in navigating life's twists and very messy turns. And we'll challenge conventional systems, because sometimes the most unconventional paths lead to the greatest discoveries. Join us as we embrace the messy, beautiful, and endlessly fascinating stories. Each episode is a testament to the power of our messy journeys and the beauty that emerges from the mess. So grab your favorite beverage, coffee, sparkling water, whatever it may be, and prepare to be inspired. Are you ready? Let's get messy. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Everything's Messy podcast. I am your messy host, Sarah. Joining me today, I'm pretty excited to have this interview with her, Elizabeth Bruckner, author of Homesteader Mindset and soon to be also podcast host, which is always exciting. She empowers her patients with the 5-element theory of traditional Chinese medicine and the power of habit creation. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me today, Sarah.
I'm pretty excited. Homesteading is, we've all heard the term, but why don't you kind of give us a quick, what that word means in your world?
Okay. It actually means two things in my world. The first is traditional homesteading, which is what most people thought of before it became trendy. And that is people living off the land, off grid, no electricity, making their own clothes, churning their own butter, fighting off wolves with a pitchfork. I do own a pitchfork, but I don't have to fight off any wolves. There are coyotes in my suburbs, but they're not a problem because I don't have any outside cats. So that is what homesteading used to look like. That is where that word came from. And it started with a number of American acts, the Homesteader Acts, starting around 1862. The first one that actually had that name was 1862. And in that, the federal government granted about 270 million acres of land to private owners, to people like you and me. And so that is where we get the idea of 40 acres and a mule and Little House on the Prairie.
Yes,
those wonderful things. But you're looking at me, and some people aren't watching us on YouTube, and you are looking at me, and you can see I probably did not make my clothes. I did not crush berries to make lipstick, and my lapis necklace was not something I forged from a mountain. I don't know. I think that's where lapis comes from.
Probably so.
So modern homesteading is an intentional way of living. It's a way to slow down, step back into the traditional skills that we had, and create more health and wealth in our lives. And I say wealth because a number of hardcore homesteaders really live below the poverty level economically, but their lives are incredibly more abundant than most people that have 2 incomes and 2 cars and a 2-car garage. So there's this reclaiming of traditional skills, which actually accidentally happen to be healthier. And I say accidentally because I don't think Ma and Pa Kettle were fermenting their fruits and vegetables in salt water, which is called brine, to make it healthier. They weren't like, oh, these microbes are really going to work. Gut health is going to be fantastic. Like, gut health was...
They didn't worry about any of that.
They didn't worry about any of that. Their digestion was probably wonderful because it didn't have a lot of the additives and the toxins. So what we found is these traditional skills also happen to create incredible life-giving substances like increased vitamins and and also these fabulous little microbes. And you talk a lot about gut health in your episode. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it's kind of fun because we get to geek out together.
Absolutely.
So don't
my
know
favorite thing.
It's my favorite thing too. So I don't know if your listeners have heard this yet. I haven't heard this on any of your episodes, but the beauty of microbes is the magical fact is that per capita, we have more microbes in our body than we do human cells.
Interesting.
Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy. That's crazy.
So,
and unfortunately, especially in modern times, we've probably either turned it into bad and or flushed most of it out.
yes. Or killed them. And so a lot of times people like my husband and I, we're always talking about poop because we're acupuncturists and poop is very important. So we're talking about poop, we're talking about microbes. And he's like, yeah, a lot of my patients want to just get rid of everything. And that is a really dangerous, slippery slope because that's what we did when I was a child. I think you're a bit younger than me, but when I was a child, they gave out antibiotics like candy.
No, that was my generation. Yeah, I'm 46. So yeah. And they would just give it for anything. And even if it was viral, you would get antibiotics, which we know today that that's bacterial and it doesn't treat anything viral. And they would just hand it out like candy for sure. And that gets rid of all of your gut flora.
That's right. That's right. And dangerous things happen when it gets rid of all your gut flora. Because when we talk about these microbes that have more cells in your body than your body, when they're in balance, they are your buddies. And in Chinese medicine, we call them the five spirits. And I don't know that they knew that it was microbes, but I used to think, why do my patients and even myself, why do I have cravings for things that are going to harm me? And they would always say it was the spirits. These spirits kind of have they're a little bit suicidal. They're wild and crazy. They're like the bikers of spirits, and they want to take you off the deep end. And I thought that never satisfied me. But then when I started learning about gut microbiome, I realized that these spirits are really these microbes that are keeping you up at night because you had your one ADHD mom that was here.
Yeah, where she talked about the parasites and the worms and things like that kids can get. Yeah.
Yes. And I experienced that myself. So I definitely treat acupuncture treats insomnia and depression, anxiety. But what I noticed myself was when I started cleaning up my gut, within 2 weeks, I was sleeping like I did when I was 6 years old. And that was I'm like, what is happening? And so what I typically do when I'm experimenting, and I always recommend that listeners experiment too, with one little thing at a time, just like you said, I started sleeping better and I wanted to know what the gut sleep connection was and started reading up on it. And like you had mentioned I love that one episode you did recently about like if you have a cabinet full of supplements and they're just staring at you, making you feel guilty, clean them out. I really don't feel called to supplements or medications. Mostly stuff in pill form is not for me. That doesn't mean that's not the story or the way that someone else is going to heal. But I want people to know that there are people that are doing quite well and they're doing it with whole foods and they're not doing it in a super chef's kiss kind of way.
Right. No, 100%. And it's in the word supplements, right? If you look back over generations and our ancestors, they didn't have to supplement, right? But our ground was more nourishing. The things that we grew out of the ground were better for us. We had all of these nutrients. Now we're living in nutrient depleted areas that it's, gravel, ground, rock, you can't grow anything. And if you could, it probably isn't going to be very good for you unless you're going to treat it with better soil and better things like that, and I know you talk about composting in your book and stuff like that, but I just feel like we have to supplement now to a certain extent. Again, I think like you said, you can treat it a lot with your raw foods, and that is definitely, the kimchi and the sauerkraut and things like that. But I feel like some of us are so depleted that these supplements have entered, but then it sort of gets saturated and it's too much. And then this wellness industry, if you will, has become a multi-billion-dollar industry, throwing something out there that says it's a supplement when you don't even really know what you're getting.
Yes, that's exactly right. I can, every day, patients come into me and sometimes their supplement lists are as long as the big pharma list. So big nutraceuticals are a problem. It's an industry that we have. And I think one of the things that your message is imparting, and for sure my message too, is to empower patients and listeners to very gently connect to their inner resourcefulness.
Absolutely.
Like there's a
Well, that's so, you put that so beautifully. I love that.
Thank you. Well, I think that we forget that you don't need a degree. You don't need a diploma hanging on your wall. I actually know a lot of people with a lot of alphabet after their names that are complete and utter idiots when it comes to their bodies. And I would include myself before I became more holistically minded. Like here I was an acupuncturist preaching, whole foods, good food. And then I was going to the store and I was doing everything that people said. I would get I was outsourcing my food. So I would get the food that had only 5 ingredients, but it came in a box.
Mm.
And then in that box, it was wrapped in plastic and it was on the shelf for a long time. And it was higher carbs. I was getting my sugar. I didn't do refined sugar for many, many years. I still don't, but I think I had like I think it started with like 20 years of no refined sugar. And that sounds fantastic, right? Unless you're filling up your body with carbs, which is just, like processed carbs, even if they have like a happy cow on the front package.
Right. It's still just a longer process to get sugar into your body. Yep.
That's exactly right. And so it wasn't until I got really sick, which is when it got messy for me. I was holding it together. I was one of those people that folks were just like, how are you doing this all? Oh, acupuncture and, eating well. And I wasn't practicing self-care. I also was a vegetarian. I'm a recovered vegetarian for 27 years. Again, I will say,
wow, that's a long time. Wow.
It is a long time. I started when I was 16 and I did it for ethical reasons. And I always thought, well, I just don't want to be a part of the damage that they're doing to animals. But no one told me. All of the magazines that I believe it was propaganda for me at 16. It was in my teeny bopper magazines. And it was, do you want to be kind to animals or do you want to be a
slaughter them? Right.
And there was no difference between the two. There was the only 2 options. And so I chose to starve myself. And I got really sick, but it took a long time because I had some really good homesteader. My grandmother was a homesteader, which I didn't know until I started learning what homesteading was. So I had some good DNA.
I was going to say it was in your genes for sure.
Me going.
So can I ask as we get into your chronic story and the things that you went through, did being a vegetarian for that long contribute to the chronic illness that you went through?
100%. 100%. And I will say that I started eating meat because I was so sick. And one of my holistic doctors, a functional medicine doctor, said, I'm going to be honest with you, vegetarians don't get better. And I was like, really? And then I started, and even in Chinese medicine, we have herbs that are animal-based. We definitely recommend. One of my teachers, she was from China, and in broken English, she'd be like, vegetarianism is great if you want to Buddha all day, but you're not Buddha-ing all day. You are practicing medicine and you're going to be using your chi for other people to help other people. And my husband and I used to joke about that all the time. And then 10 years later, my body was like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to make you Buddha all day because you're going to be sick in bed. And the way that came was very slowly. But I just didn't recognize it. So before I go further in that, I became a vegetarian. I became a meat eater very slowly. I had no enzymes for it. So I was really sick for 2 weeks. I had to use enzymes outside of me because when you don't eat certain foods for 27 years, your body's like, oh, we don't need to make enzymes for this. And so then your body can't digest it and you can get really sick.
Wow.
And then from that decision that I'm going to eat meat, and here's why, because I don't want to be a useless piece of meat myself that's ill, that my husband's taking care of, that my family's going to have to watch me slowly die, because that was what was happening. Bed sores, the whole thing. And it wasn't until after I found out about homesteading, that I found out about something called permaculture, something called regenerative agriculture. And all of these things are like, how do you treat the land? How do you mimic nature? So when you talk about soil depletion, yes, even organic farms can have soil depletion. Regenerative agriculture is teaching you how to help your soil replenish itself, how to close those loops. It's possible. It takes maybe 1 or 2 years. It doesn't take as long as people think, but it's something that I'd never heard of. And I'd never heard of animals living happy, amazing lives. and being really healthy and doing what Joel Salatin, who is an incredible farmer in Virginia, and he's written several books that are hilarious. He says, allow the pigs to be pigs, allow the cows to be cows. Like he moves his cows every day they go to a new pasture. And so they're super healthy. They don't need antibiotics. They don't, because they're not overcrowded. They're
Right.
not eating, you know, they're not carnivores. So they're not eating their own. They were mad cow. They were feeding cows.
Sure.
Cow,
Sure.
madness. That stuff doesn't have to happen. And it is more expensive. Real food is more expensive than fake
Definitely.
food.
Right. When you can't industrialize it, of course it's going to cost more. But you have to ask yourself, what is the price? Well, the price is your health.
That's right.
Right. And that, unfortunately, it sounds like both of us had to learn that the hard way. And that is frustrating in and of itself, but also kind of it angers me. Like, how come we don't know these better practices more, earlier in life? How come this isn't more mainstream? How come we're having to be the woo woo people out here where people just give us the side eye and they don't want to hear what we have to say? Because, it needs to come more front and center. It really does. And I think, like, you had the big misunderstanding of actually what, being a vegetarian is, and even vegan. And I've been both, so I can speak to both, but they don't understand that all of these plants they're putting up to make these impossible burgers or these chemical compounds to make this fake food is actually doing worse for the environment than we are, cultivating the animals and things like that. And so that's a big, big misconception.
It's a huge misconception. Also, thinking that I was so much healthier than everyone else because I was a vegetarian, but I still had chronic illness. When I became an acupuncturist and when I stopped eating refined sugar, there was a definite shift.
Sure.
And I was healthier absolutely. I went, I think, about 28 years without an antibiotic.
Wow.
And I know my body was super happy. And then 2020 hit and things got wacky and I was given an antibiotic and I thought that it was necessary because I'm not against Western medicine.
Sure.
But what I recognized was it was the most beautiful experiment. So when you say you feel angry, I definitely have moments of that. And then I also have moments of gratitude that you and I are having this discussion because you and I have gone through like
100%.
heart attack at 43 years old. You're going to wake up.
Yeah. You don't have a choice.
You don't have a choice, right? Especially if you have babies that you need to take care of,
Yeah.
you're going to wake up. And for me, like being, bedridden for weeks, I had a choice. And the choice was I could keep going this way and it wasn't going to get any more fun, or I could stop and figure out, use my education to figure out what was going on.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And like you said, what do you say? When you were talking about, I just lost my train of thought. When you were talking about the holistic and the Western medicine, I've always said on this show, I've always wanted them to marry because I think there's a place for both, right? I've said before, especially in this country, we have the best acute emergency medicine by far than any other country. Car accidents, broken bones, all of these wounds that can be treated very, very well acutely. We have it. We don't have the maintenance of medicine. And that's where I feel that the naturopathic side can come in and kind of fill that hole. And I would think people would want that.
Well, big business doesn't want it.
Well, of course.
So when we talk about marrying, I think philosophically, yes, we should marry. I think that my acupuncturists that want to be admired as doctors or they want to be besties with doctors. I don't think that's the best way to go. I think it's a very separate medicine. And I'm saying this mostly for my acupuncturists that are listening because they're like, I'm going to get that doctor title. I'm like, I'm not going to spend another $20,000 to put a DR in front of my name. I'll just change my first name to doctor and that'll be much less expensive.
I love that.
$600 to be Dr. Bruckner. But truly what I find is that the longer you're in higher education, sometimes the farther you get away from truth. And this is an organized assault on natural medicine. So back when Rockefeller started the hospital systems and all that sorts of stuff, he put some guy in charge. Callie Means wrote a book about it. And it was...
Yeah. And his name was, I have the report. And he basically started changing the medical books and making naturopathic medicine the woo-woo that we talk about today. But that's where we came from. And then all of that went away to introduce
petroleum, pharmaceuticals. And so you've read the book. So I'm so excited because you're the only person I've talked to who's read the book. Can we just talk about the doctor that was in charge of training other doctors? And what was he on, like meth or cocaine or something? And he would have 5-day cocaine binges. Like I always thought, why on earth are we making residents in hospitals not sleep? It made no sense to me. It was because this crazy guy who was on cocaine binges, made people stay up for 5 days.
And if he could do it, then you could be a doctor. Yeah, it's the craziest thing. Well, and the other doctor, and I forget his name too. I hate that my memory is, thank you, perimenopause. I can't remember quite the author's name, but the study that was done, I want to say in the maybe early 40s or 50s, where they started to turn fat bad. And they started to say sugar was good. And they actually printed articles in the newspaper saying that if you want to keep a headache away, eat a teaspoon of sugar, and like all of these things, and made fat the villain.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, that's incredible to me. That's just so, and it's maddening.
It's maddening. I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, fat-free was the way to go in the 80s and 90s.
Yep.
And I was eating all sorts of
Tab and Diet Coke and all the
and like those cookies that didn't taste like cookies.
Yeah.
They never satisfied you. Now I have a very fat, animal fat heavy diet. And so when I first started eating animal fats again, and you have to start slow, even I keep calling her the ADHD mom, but the woman that talked about ADHD.
Yeah, Dana Kay. Yeah.
Dana Kay, thank you. She talks about like with fermentation, you have to be careful because some people's guts aren't healthy enough to take that.
Right.
So you do need to start small. And so I did an introduction into gut healthy foods using the GAPS protocol. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. Is that a combination of like elimination and then adding back things slowly, or so sort of also like the brats and things like that, the brats diet?
Yeah, similar to that. And it's, for those that don't know about it, it's really just getting rid of processed food. That is the bottom line. Getting rid of processed food, getting rid of a few high allergy foods for a time. It's a temporary diet. It's only 2 years long, which doesn't sound that temporary. And I'm a year in, so it's definitely not feeling temporary. But it then includes high protein, high fat, like just to what you're like when I say high protein, high fat compared to the standard American diet.
Right. Well, and if you have been on SAD for a really long time, that transition in itself is going to be extremely hard.
Yes.
Walking away from those chemicals they put in the processed food, there's a reason why we eat a whole bag of Doritos but only eat one steak. I mean, it's not.
Right. That's right.
It's chemically induced that way.
That's exactly right. And so when I think anger is a really good motivator for change. And so I love that you said I was angry when I started learning these things, because if we weren't a little bit ticked off, I don't think we'd be wasting our time writing books and sitting on podcasts and talking. Like I could just talk to my friends at the coffee house. But instead, it's like this message is so important. And when you can take your anger and transmute it into something remarkable, which is what you're doing with this podcast and your fancy mic that makes you sound fantastic.
You're so kind. And can I just say really quick, I'm very appreciative of you having listened to the podcast. That really is wonderful. Thank you for that.
Yeah, who wouldn't? It's a really good podcast.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you.
So yeah, the idea behind there is joy in what we're doing. So when people hear us say like we're fighting a battle, we can do it and we can have incredible mindfulness and peace and connection. Because when you talk to someone who understands that seed oils are going to harm you, it's almost like, oh, okay, you've made it through the war. You've got the battle scars to prove it.
Yeah, we can be friends.
Yes, yes. And I think that we're just going to keep including more people in that friend group, because people are going to listen and go, huh, what's this thing about seed oils? Like the other day, Friday, I went over to a friend's house because I had some extra kefir grains. I don't know if you can see it, but I've got some dairy fermenting right behind us.
Awesome.
It's there as a reminder to take it and put it and make it into ice cream. And so I had some extra kefir grains because they grow. And I just make a point of anytime I have extra kefir grains, I tell my friends who wants to learn how. And then I go over to their house and they bring their mason jars and we walk through the health benefits, because that's super geeky to me. And then what you can do.
But I love that. I love it. It's like when I taught my friends the first time how to make their own sourdough, it was the side eyes and this is so, why would you that? And of course, I don't eat a lot of bread to begin with, but the homemade sourdough is actually okay for those of us with gluten sensitivity. And it took a long time to just They're like, why can't I just go buy this in the grocery store?
And let's talk about why you can't buy it at a grocery store. So I do probably 90% of my shopping at farmers markets because number one, there's no middleman. Number two, there's not a lot of preservatives to get it to you. It gets pulled out of the ground, or my baker who bakes 48-hour fermented sourdough, he makes it that morning and you get it. And so there's a number of reasons why we do that. If you're in the supermarket and it's sourdough bread and it says sourdough and then you turn it over, and oftentimes there's 20 different chemicals in there, many of which you cannot say. And then it's been sitting in plastic for maybe a week, and plastic breaks down, especially the paper wrapping plastic. And so there's a lot of reasons why getting your own sourdough and making it yourself is healthier and is more fun. And it's also a moving meditation. I do not make sourdough, actually. I think there's many spokes to homesteading. And I love telling people that, like, you don't have to do it perfectly. You can make your own clothes and fight off wolves.
Sure.
But you can make sourdough, or you can have a friend that makes sourdough, which is what I typically do. But you find the things that really ignite your curiosity and also bring joy to your life. So I bet for you, teaching your friends how to make sourdough was fun.
Yes and no. They were
the side eye was a little hard.
They hadn't passed through the threshold yet. Some of them are still holding out, but I'm working on them. But part of the reason too, and I'm not sure about the kefir that you're growing, but part of the reason is it's a process, and it takes a long time, and you have to fold it, and then you have to let it rise again, and so it's not an immediate, and so you do have to plan, and so that's we are used to the convenience of the world nowadays, and so busy parents, busy life, that's just hard to fit in there. But you were talking so eloquently about how learning those skills again and how that ignites joy and fits into our life, and you sort of feel, I don't know if it's more grateful, but the thing that you're seeing that's nourishing you, you actually grew, you made, you baked, whatever it was, and that, to me, there's a connection there.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me? And I will tell you, there's some good news for kefir. So I am the laziest gardener, homesteader, chef you have ever
I love how you call yourself out.
I would, like, some people are like, I'm willing to debate anyone. I'm willing to go up against anyone with their home routine, and they will definitely be like, yes, you are the laziest. You are. Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about that, number one, that I didn't know how to cook at all. Like, I knew how to boil water for pasta. That was it until my 40s.
Wow.
Like, I was raised a latchkey kid. My mom never taught me. She was a big fan of microwave. So slowly but surely, we got rid of the microwave. I was like, I think we're going to do this. This is a big deal. And so I had to boil my water for tea. Like, it was that was the beginning stages of me becoming a homesteader. And so what I talk about with kefir or anything is I'm always looking for the things that I really want to work on. For instance, if you invited me over for sourdough, although you seem really cool, I would be like, I'd be happy to come over and take some of your sourdough home with me and feed it to my husband, but I'm not really interested in making it.
Fair enough.
It's just for me, it's just too much work.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But you gotta love it. Like, when a friend brings over a loaf, I do like cartwheels. I don't even eat gluten, but they're pretty, and they've stamped the little leaves on it, and it's such love in a physical form. So I'm gonna tell you about kefir. Kefir is, and first of all, it's really pronounced kefir, but yeah. I will forget. Sorry. And I'll keep mixing it. So I just call it kefir because that's what Americans call it. I've tried saying it the right way, and then I mix it, and it's like two different words that have nothing to do with kefir. So kefir it is. So kefir, it's like yogurt in that it's a culture that's going to culture the milk, but yogurt, you've got to heat up. You've got to do this timing thing. Kefir, you take your grains, you put it in some milk, and then you sit it on your counter with a cloth over it for 2 days. And that's the end of making kefir.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredibly simple.
It's 5 minutes. And when I go and show my friends, I'm going mostly because they're so scared of like, well, these things are alive, and is it going to go bad? And, if you have raw milk, it typically sours, it doesn't rot. So there's something called clabbering, which I've never done, but a lot of farmers would just leave their milk out on the table, and it becomes kind of yogurty on its own, called clabber.
Almost curdling, maybe?
I don't know. I've seen it in pictures, and you can use it for cooking afterwards, but it's super, super sour. But all this to say that naturally, raw milk doesn't go bad. It clabbers, it sours.
Makes sense. I love raw milk.
I do too. I do too. And the beautiful thing about kefir, and I always do a 48-hour ferment, which just means it sits on my counter for 48 hours, is that it eats up most of the lactose and it eats up most of the protein called casein. So
Mm,
casein, a lot of times people will be like, oh, I'm lactose intolerant because I get migraines or I have digestive issues. Sometimes it's the lactose and sometimes it's the casein.
that
And
makes
this gets
sense.
rid of both. So I was very sensitive to dairy. And now I can eat this. Well, I make ice cream with it and
Wow.
I eat it with fruit or I just eat it on its own. It's quite delicious. And it's a powerhouse of probiotics, an absolute powerhouse. And okay, here's my last I'm geeking. Sarah, you need to ask
No,
me
no, no,
questions.
no, that's okay. No, I love it. I love it.
So the last piece that I love about kefir is that it actually eats candida. So candida is important to have in your
Interesting.
system. You know, everybody says like if you
In
get
very small amounts.
that's right. You don't want candida overgrowth or else it will take over. It's like weeds. It'll take over the neighborhood. And so this actually eats kefir and I'm sorry, it eats candida and it colonizes. So when you have yogurt, it kind of passes through you when you digest. It helps and feeds stuff, but then it passes through. Kefir's like, I'm going to hang out. I'm going to hang out here and I'm going to continue to eat the candida and I'm going to continue to create good, happy colonies in your gut.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that I didn't know. And that's pretty important. And nobody likes to talk about the word candida, but it is sort of what a balanced gut needs too. So if you have something that is actually going to hang out and do that, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
Wow. Okay. No, you didn't geek out. I love the information. I really do. So, going back a little bit to the actual chronic illness part, right? And you said it was sort of a slow burn. What finally brought you to be like, because, we were talking earlier about, people that have the alphabet soup behind their name doesn't mean that they know everything. I always try to be like, you have to be an expert in you. Right. And so you may not know exactly what's going on, but you know when something is off, when you don't feel right, and, we talk a lot on this program about, your doctors will gaslight you because they say your labs are completely normal, but you're feeling different or off. So was that kind of your experience or what kind of got your attention?
Well, I was lucky in that I had a medical degree, a master's of science in acupuncture and oriental medicine. So there was not the ability to gaslight me. I knew that something was wrong. I also knew that some of my textbooks in grad school had pharmaceutical brands in them. So I knew that even my school, which was holistic and it was Eastern medicine, I knew that it was still bought
Mm.
by big pharma. And so I have a healthy distrust of big pharma. And with that being said, my brain was stopping. It was no longer working. So I was
Mm.
having incredible brain fog. It started with a very long menstrual cycle. I was ill and tired in much of grad school. I remember in between every class, as soon as there was a break, I'd put my head down on the desk and take a nap. So I had a few friends, but I don't remember many because I was sleeping any time that I could because it was taking so much energy. The brain needs a lot of fat and protein in order to think. And when you're, learning copious amounts of information and you're not feeding your body anything that's going to fuel it, you're just exhausted all the
You're
time.
done. Yeah, you're
You're
done.
done. And I just thought that was maybe I was just a low energy kind of gal. And then when I opened up my multi bed clinic, I was kind of running on empty, running on adrenaline. Loved my clinic, loved my patients, loved the success that I saw in their body's ability to heal. And that taught me that, oh, bodies can heal themselves. Like this is possible. I learned it in the textbooks, but now I'm seeing it. And lastly, had back problems that made me decide that I was going to take a little time off and write my first book. And um, my back was so bad that I couldn't put dishes away. Like I was young, I was maybe 40 or so. So that was the beginning of me slowing down work. And then I started working for my husband's clinic after I sold my clinic. And I worked 2 days a week and then I was sick for 5 days.
Mm.
And this went on for about a year because I come from a family of workhorses.
Yeah, it's what you know to do.
You push through, right? You push
If
through.
you're not bleeding from your eyeballs, you rub some dirt on it and get back to work. Yeah.
That's right. My dad was once going blind from retina detachment. And
Mm.
I was in my 20s and I'm like, Dad, what's going on? He's like, oh, I can't see in this eye, but I'll be fine. I'm like, we have to go to the hospital. Like, you are going blind. That is the thing.
That's not normal.
Right. That's not normal. And so I'm not quite my dad, but I was pretty close. Like I always thought, oh, I'm holistically minded, blah, blah, blah. But here I was getting sick. And so I had chronic bronchitis, a chronic cough that wouldn't go away, and fatigue that was so debilitating. I remember going out for coffee with some friends. And again, I'm in my 40s and I put my head down on the table and just started crying. I don't know why I'm so tired. And everyone said, honey, you just need hormones. Like I've got this and and again, that works for some people. And for me, it was like, that's not what I'm called to. I don't know what's going on, but that's not the answer just yet. And so I went to 7 different Western doctors.
Okay, so wait a minute. So I don't have the medical background that you do.
Yeah.
But if you give me 3 guesses, I'm going to see if I can guess, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 3 guesses. I'm going to start with, was it mold?
No.
Okay. Hashimoto's?
That's a good question. That's a good one. No, but it was thyroid related.
Okay. And so it was hypothyroid.
That was part of it. My brain and
I got half credit.
You got a lot of credit, actually. These are really good questions. And a lot of times people are walking around with Hashimoto's or other thyroid issues. And like you said, the doctors are going, your labs are fine. So because I was so brain foggy, I was trying to find the Western diagnosis, and then I was going to treat it with Eastern. Meanwhile, I'm getting more and more sick. And then finally, I had fatty liver. And I didn't understand. I don't drink alcohol
and you're like, but I was a vegetarian for 27 years. How could I have fatty liver? Right.
That's right. And what they don't tell you is seed oils can do that. Like seed oils can full on do that.
That inflammation is just going to get you one way or another.
That's right. And people just don't realize it. And so I was really confused about some of these things. They did check me for ovarian cancer because of the bleeding. And then finally, because I was continuing to work while doing this, and I finally could not stand if I sat down to put something like a pot away in my cabinet because I was too tired to bend to put the pot away. I had to sit down on the ground. I couldn't get up. If my husband wasn't home, then I would just have to crawl to an area and lay down and the fatigue was incredible.
Wow.
And so there were numerous diagnoses. But when I went to an herbalist,
was one of them fibromyalgia? They always seem to throw that out there to blanket all of the other things.
Yeah, chronic fatigue was the umbrella that they were throwing on it. And really, chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia is basically this, we don't know what's wrong. You've just got a lot of symptoms and there's no test to be done. And yeah, it was very frustrating from that respect. And then the colleague checked my pulse and he's like, oh, well, you've got yin separating from yang. And in Chinese medicine, that's one step before coma and death. It's not good.
Good.
Yeah. And here I am working only 2 days a week, but working. And so I told my husband, I think I need to stop working. And he was like, I was going to fire you today. I knew he was having dreams of me passing away. And
my gosh.
He was talking to his friends, how do I love her and know that she's allowing herself to die? Because he could clearly see that I wasn't taking care of myself. But I was so sick that I couldn't. When people talk about brain fog, my brain fog manifested in, I had incredible noise sensitivity. I could not go out in public and I couldn't have a conversation if there was noise. I'd have to wear little earbuds. It was so confusing for me that I could not cross a street by myself. So because when you think about it, you don't realize how much your brain does, but you have to look both ways. You have to think about the curb and how deep it is. You have to make sure that you can get across before the car is coming down the street. Are there any other pedestrians? There are so many decisions that you make just naturally as an adult that when your brain's not working, you can't do it. So when I was able to get out of bed, I could walk maybe 5 minutes because movement was one of the first things that I did because I knew it was free, just like you mentioned.
Well, and you hear that everywhere. Well, you need to get out and exercise. That will give you more energy and blah, blah, blah. And for a lot of us, that's true to a certain point.
Right. And sleep was very important. And real food was very important. So I don't remember your question because I went all over the place.
No. Just really, what was the defining moment where you were like, okay, this is what I have. This is it. This is my diagnosis. And now you can build upon how to heal.
Thank you. So thank you for bringing me back because I was like, and then I couldn't.
No, it's okay.
The defining moment was when my friend and colleague said, you have yin separating from yang. And I realized the doctors weren't telling me what it was, but as an acupuncturist, I knew that was very serious and I needed to fix this before I died. And that meant that everything stopped. We had a retreat that we had already, again, this is the workhorse part of me. We had a retreat set. Patients had given me their deposits. We had a retreat area already rented. And I remember crying to my husband and going, I cannot call these people and tell them that we have to cancel. Like, I can't, it was all about, I can't set boundaries. I can't prioritize my health because these people are more important. We don't want to inconvenience. But at that point, I had to. And so we canceled it. And then I just slept for like a good month. Wow. Just rested. And I remember, and I talk about this a little bit in the book because there's a woman in the book that is, she's in a car accident and she goes down really fast. And in it, I use some of the tools that I use to get out of my chronic illness. And I remember telling my husband, like, I'm not useful. Like, that was my big thing. I'm not useful. And he's like, sweetie, all you need to do right now is eat, sleep, and poop. If you eat, sleep, and poop, you are, because again, remember, acupuncturists, we like people pooping. You are then, you're fulfilling your task list. And I remember going, okay, eat, sleep, and poop. Because I would forget to eat
I kind of think we relate here is, how our society is, how we're programmed. That shame cycle sets in of it wasn't enough just to heal yourself because you're going through all the laundry list of the things that you should be doing and you should be taking care of and your, expectations that you've placed on yourself, which we put the most amount of expectations on ourselves, and then the demands to fulfill those needs, right? So I'm sure so it was sort of a mental piece as well as your physical body was like, time out, I'm done.
Yeah. I would say the first 3 months I was so tired. I had no mental thought about it. And then 4 months in, it was like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? And I did have to step away from my worth being connected to an achievement, whatever that achievement is. And so I started saying, like, my worth is not connected to my gene size, and my worth is not connected to how much Sarah thinks I do a good job on this podcast.
Right.
Because we're always looking for that worth outside, and that's really
absolutely. But that takes practice. That takes practice, and it takes being aware. And, sometimes, you have to tell yourself, it's enough I showed up today.
That's
but
right.
To stop those intrusive thoughts, to stop that shame cycle, you have to just, try and close it out as much as you can. Because again, unfortunately, I think we're sort of wired, as women in the society, the lie that was told us where you could have it all, do all these things. Yeah, but I don't want to.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want to. And I shouldn't feel less than because I don't want to. And so that, I don't know about you, but I had to learn that.
Oh, it's a skill. Absolutely, 100%. And this idea of, I love that you said, I can have it all, because I thought that I could. I really would say that, 10 years ago, the me that didn't cook thought, well, I'm a career woman and, I have an education and I don't have time to cook food. Not I'm better than these peasants, but almost like I'm just too busy. It's just, so I outsourced the most important thing that I could have in my life, which was my health. I outsourced my health, even though I was a healthcare practitioner, and that was troublesome. And so when I started saying, oh, it's more important that I'm healthy. And for example, today, I had a lot of things on my to-do list today before our podcast, but I was tired. And so at lunch, I took a nap. And 10 years ago, that would have been like the most absurd thing that I would have ever done. And here's the deal with self-care. You're not only caring for yourself, you're caring for others, because I have a much lower incidence of snappiness if I'm well rested and well fed.
Absolutely. My kids even talk about this. I still have my moments, but I'm not typically the crappy mom that I used to be, because I'm able to set that boundary. I need to go take my walk. I need to go lift weights. I need to go, take 20 minutes and do my breath work. And now they're starting to say that. Now they're starting to be like, oh yeah, I need this space. I need this time. Bravo, you're so much younger than I am to know that.
Well, you're modeling it.
But that was hard. And there was some resistance in the beginning, but it's consistency, and you just keep going it. And again, though, we talk about the shame and just the guilt and why, my kids need me and this and that. And it's like, time out, stop the noise. But it's really hard sometimes to turn down the noise.
super hard to turn down the noise, especially when we've been programmed to achieve and to like hang our hat on the coat rack of achievement. Like our self-worth is going to be based on achievement. And once I started seeing it in my patients, like patients that were losing their hair because they're so stressed out because they need to get A's and not B's in school, and moms that have healthy, happy kids, and they're taking them to every single event that that child wants, but they're not eating properly because
they don't have time.
They don't have time. And so we've kind of we've kind of forgotten that less is more in terms of living. You know, sometimes, absolutely, if we live by the seasons, winter is for reflection and hibernating and kind of slowing down. But what happens in December, right? It's like a party every weekend, and you got to get all the Christmas gifts
and sugar and
sugar,
you know, copious amounts. And,
yes.
You know, they call it flu season or, you know, whatever the term is now, but that's because you inherently uptick your sugar intake.
Yeah.
And what do you think's going to happen?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So and I think that people think, especially someone like me that doesn't do refined sugar, how do you get through the holidays? There's a lot of good food that can be had that and you can still celebrate. I mean, we bond with food, fire, and alcohol is what one priest told me. And so it is important to go to someone's house and snack with them, but you can bring your own food. Like
Sure.
I often bring liver pate and no one eats it but me because everybody's afraid of it. It's delicious, but it gives me incredible nutrient density while I'm there hanging out with my friends and being of service.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there are ways, you know, you can have a mocktail, so you can still have something in a pretty glass. It doesn't have to have the alcohol. You certainly don't have to have the Christmas cookies, although I will say I'm guilty to have one every once in a while. But okay, so you finally figure out this diagnosis, and we're going to go with thyroid. And then are you able to say what else, or that was the biggest?
There was a number of them. And so, Epstein-Barr, virus, and fatty liver, thyroid not communicating with the brain. There was a few others that I honestly I did.
So we're just talking the big cesspool of it all. Oh my gosh. Okay. So as you start to break those down, and I've heard EBV, I've heard just horror stories of that, and then it coming back as shingles again because you probably had stress and sugar and you didn't take care of yourself, and so here comes in the shingles, those kinds of things. But as you start to unpack it a little bit, is any part of you like relieved in some sense that now you have a starting point of what to do?
Back then, well, I kind of threw all of their diagnoses out in the trash because.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because they just wanted more tests.
Oh.
And I just didn't have the energy for more tests. Like
they wanted to put you on the conveyor belt of medicine.
Yes.
Got it.
And I was like, nah. I mean, had they said, yes, these are the 5 things and we need to work on these, but they were giving me things like chronic fatigue syndrome, which there isn't anything.
What do you do with that?
They throw medication at you, right? And so what I did after resting was then I started having a little bit of nutrient-dense food, and I started creating habits in my life. And that's really where the Homesteader Mindset, the book, comes from, is teaching people how to create these habits without being overwhelmed. Because I didn't have a full-time job at the time, but I had a full-time illness. I was too sick to really do anything outside of the house. And so I thought, well, what's the one thing I could do to get real food in our house? And then I started 5-minute habits a day.
That's incredible. Well, and let's be honest, right? The practice of homesteading, especially starting out, it's not easy. Right? It's hard. It's hard work. It's patience. It's, you know, learning this technique, and this didn't work. I need to start over and do this. I mean, that's the biggest, I think, obstacle for people to start.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely more difficult than putting your feet up at the end of a really busy day and watching Netflix. Like that, because that's our choice, right? We're exhausted and we just want to put our feet up and we just want to veg out. And like the boss was yelling at me today and the kids are sick and I just need to turn my brain off. And so what I learned through this, and here's one kind of weird secret. I started learning French just before I got sick. And I did it solely for pleasure. there are like less than 1% French speakers in Southern California. There was no reason for me to learn French. It wasn't going to, take off my career. I just wanted to learn it. And then I got sick, and I remember telling my husband, we don't have my income, and I really need to keep learning French because it's the only lifeboat I have right now. And so I combated what used to be a history of depression with learning something for pure joy. And that meant I had one lesson once a week, and then I did some free app on my phone, and I read a bunch of blog articles from this guy who's now my boss in the language learning field, fluent in 3 months. And so I was only doing that for joy, and no one in the language learning world knew I was sick. So I would call.
So it was okay.
It was my safe place. And I didn't have to tell the story. I didn't have to rehash it because I didn't really know what the story was. And I also knew, like, I didn't go on disability, not because we didn't need the money, but because I didn't want that label. I was just really careful about the power of suggestion. And so that was my secret. And when I started learning French, and I realized that I've been laying down all day, I've been exhausted, but I get excited for my 20 minutes of French that I'm going to learn. What's happening here? I was building neural pathways that were helping me feel like I was in the solution and not the problem. And so it was happening while I was still working. And I remember being tired from work and wanting to do this. So when we say homesteading is difficult, absolutely. But so is language learning. Like no one goes, unless you have a strong desire for it, it is not fun. And homesteading as well. Like, I want to motivate people to find their joy and go from there. And so for me, during the illness, the homesteading part, which I didn't know I was a homesteader until 2020. So after I was getting better, I didn't know. But I did it because of the pandemic and some panic that was happening there. But during the illness, I thought, well, what is one easy way I can get some more nutrients in our body? And that was fermentation, which was just taking carrot sticks, putting it in a jar with salt water, opening up the jar on my shelf every day, once or twice a day. And then in 7 days, I had pickled vegetables, and it was 7 times more nutrient dense than it had been before that. And there were probiotics in there. And, 1 teaspoon of sauerkraut can have more probiotics, variety and number, than a $58 bottle of expensive probiotics.
Yeah. So no, that's amazing. And I love how you talk about habits. We talk about habits all the time on this show. And I love how you break it down, and it doesn't have to be overwhelming to start. You're starting with that one thing that you're going to consistently do, that's going to take you to the next thing, that's going to take you to the next thing. And I think there's so much value in that, no matter what you're going to do. And I'll say to what you were saying about the French, I think anytime we take ourselves out of our comfort zone and make ourselves push ourselves, do something, right? We're making that inner toddler uncomfortable. And because the toddler wants to go home and eat the ice cream and binge watch the Netflix, and that's what they want to do, right? And so anytime we push that toddler a little bit, it grows a little bit, grows up a little bit. And that's a huge, awareness to have, and to do that when you're feeling the way that you did. I mean, that's huge.
Well, it was, again, just like with your heart attack, we had a choice. We could have been victims, and we could have just gotten lumped into that disabled system of, getting a check and not being able to work again and all that stuff. We had a choice. And sometimes that choice is, someone's so sick they can't get out of it. I'm not at all berating anyone that hasn't had a success story like we have had. I just don't think they've had their success story yet.
Absolutely.
Like, I think you have to have that mindset. And when it comes to habits, I would love to talk a little bit about habits, because I was thinking about it today while I was washing dishes. So one of the habits that I have are habit stacking, is when you take 2 habits and you put them together, like a mindless task and then another task. And then the other type is habit chaining. And I did both of that this morning. I'm like, I'm going to talk to Sarah about this.
I love it.
So it's about habits.
So you've read Atomic Habits then? It's my favorite book.
Love Atomic Habits. I've read it, and then I've listened to it on top of that. And I even did a video on it, because it was it's so important for language learning, but anytime you want to learn something. And so an example of habit chains and habit stacks, a habit stack happened today while I was washing dishes. Every morning I wash our breakfast dishes. And during that, I listen to a podcast. And when I'm learning something new, for example, what type of healing herbs I can grow in my garden, because I love there's like herbs that can stop bleeding and herbs that can help with anxiety and herbs that can help with depression. So I'll put on a podcast about healing herbs in the kitchen as I'm washing the dishes. That's a habit stack. You can do it while you're commuting as well. So if someone's going, gosh, I'd really love to make sourdough, or like Elizabeth, I never want to make sourdough, but that kefir that only takes 5 minutes sounds like a good thing, then you can do a habit stack where if you're commuting to work, you just put in a podcast that's going to teach you some of those things. And you only have to do it for 5 minutes.
Right.
You don't have to have your whole hour commute be oh my gosh, Elizabeth and Sarah said to listen to this. No, like listen to music and then do like a little dessert in the middle. Like I'm going to have like some fun music after I listen to it. And then I'm going to go back to what I normally listen to. The habit chain, which is putting a habit right after a habit that already exists. I really love this because it gets you out of the mindset of fundamentalism in habit stacking and in habit chaining. Like usually people are like, I'm going to start on Monday. Well, I say magic Mondays don't exist.
Yeah.
They're not
I totally agree with that.
right? They're just Mondays. And terrible Tuesday will come along if you're trying to make Mondays magic.
And wacky Wednesday and all of it. Like it's just
it just goes on and on.
It's a day, people. It's a day.
Exactly. And so like I like to do it with the habits that we already have. Like we can crowd out the bad habits, or we can make them just like Candida overgrowth. We can have some bad habits. Like it's not against the law to be a healthy person and watch Netflix. But is it in your best interest to do 5 hours of it and then not have anything else? So the next habit chain that I did as I was thinking about you was I made my liver pate, which could take about 20 minutes to do. And 10 years ago, I would have been like, that's crazy. First of all, I'm not eating anything that has liver in it. And second of all, I'm not going to sit and watch onions simmer in butter while I could not even stand near a stove. So while I'm washing the dishes, I've got some of it cooking and I'm chopping up the vegetables right after I'm done washing the dishes, throwing them in, which is vegetables are just the onions and the garlic, throwing that in the pot. And then I'm going on to do something else. And I'm in the kitchen, but I'm doing something else. And then it ends up taking total of 5 minutes of effort, 5 to 10 minutes of effort to cook the liver and then just use a hand wand to blend it up and put it in some little jars and put it in my fridge and then freeze it. And then I have 10 days of
nourishment.
An incredibly nutrient-dense food. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. And you're way ahead of making your own liver pate. I'm still taking the liver supplement. Well, and I don't know if you've heard of Forces of Nature. They're also regenerative farming. And in there, they have venison and buffalo and other things. But in it, they put liver, heart, spleen, pancreas, all these things that we should be eating. So I get it that way, but I'm not quite to your level yet.
Well, I don't make sourdough, so we're even. And I do want to say, like, there's probably some people driving, maybe on their commute with their noses crinkled up, like, oh my gosh, what are they talking about? Yes, start with supplements. If you can't stomach liver pate, I will say that I put more fresh rosemary from my garden in my liver pate than liver. And that's probably why it's so yummy. Like it's just basically rosemary and garlic. And that works for me. But you don't have to do this right away. Let's say there's somebody listening, and I would be so happy if it was someone in their 20s going, I wouldn't mind learning how to cook.
Right? Oh, if I could only go back.
Me too. Stop outsourcing. So what I would recommend is if you are thinking about dipping your toe in the kitchen and you want a really easy meal, just learn how to bake a chicken. And that's so simple. You bake a chicken, you wash it off with water, you pat it dry, you put some grease on it, like I put chicken fat or butter on it. You stick it in the oven, and now you have chicken with vegetable. You can make a chicken sandwich. You can make a chicken salad. You can make chicken soup. You see where I'm going?
Yes.
You've got like 4 to 5 meals from one cooking, and then
we don't mean Costco chicken.
No, you want happy chicken. Actually, in our area, Primal Pastures is really good.
Okay, yeah.
And you can go visit the farm, which is kind of cool. And I remember going there and I said to the guy that owns it, I'm like, when I grow up, now I'm older than him. I'm like, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. And he looked confused. And I was like, because I'm being funny, but okay, I'll just give me my chicken. So yeah, if you do that, and then you can take that carcass and make it into a meat stock, which, I just have as a snack. I have like 3 cups of meat stock, which is also incredible for gut health.
And the gelatin and everything that comes, it's so nourishing. It really is. And you're using the whole part of the animal that's sacrificed for you to have this nutrient-dense food. Yeah.
Yes.
No, I love that. I love that so much. So do you still have a few minutes? Do you need to go? Okay. So just 2 questions. First, I want to talk a little bit about, and I talked about a little bit, that's on the episode last week or the week before, but when we talk about our wellness space, right, we talk about it can be oversaturated with all of these fads and gimmicks and these types of things. And one of the things that has really come in my world and my sphere that I'm kind of focusing on is the Chinese herbs, right? And I had somebody tell me, you know, Chinese herbs, they have something for everything, and that's great. I think the problem that I'm starting to see, at least some of the people, either they don't completely understand what each herb is capable of, the crossover of maybe the medication that you're taking with it, and or another supplement, and or another herb. And so how does somebody that's starting out like me, kind of getting into that, what's the first basic thing they need to understand about the Chinese herbs?
Okay, so usually I am all about patient empowerment and educating yourself and then moving forward with it. However, Chinese herbs are medicine in our tradition, which means I wouldn't recommend that you just take them over the counter. I don't think that they should be illegal.
Of course,
But
yeah.
I think that there's so many things that go into play when we prescribe something to someone for a Chinese herb. Chinese herbs by themselves can do certain actions, and then when they're in a formula with like 4 other herbs, they can do the complete opposite action. And then we're also looking at a lot of the tendencies towards your body. Are you deficient or are you excess? What organ in you is deficient in excess? Are you tending towards yin or yang? And what organ has more yin and too much yang, or too much damp or too much heat? And all of these words that I'm saying, most of them are English words, right? Deficiency, excess, heat, cold, yin yang, no, but masculine, feminine, damp and wet and heat. Those are all words in our colloquial speak, but they mean something completely different in Chinese medicine. And the way that we typically prescribe that is we have someone come in for a consultation. We look at their tongue, because if you can look at someone's tongue, it will actually tell you different parts of the body, like the sides of your tongue, our liver, gallbladder. A lot of times, one of the parlor tricks we used to do is we would have medical students come in that were training to be doctors. And I would, as one of the graduate students, I would give a lecture on what Chinese medicine is. And I would walk around the room and I would have them stick out their tongue, and I could tell them something about themselves. And it seemed very fortune-telling, right?
Yeah,
They have red dots on the front of their tongue. They probably have problems with insomnia, because that's like the heart, and the heart is where the spirit settles. This is all the philosophy of Chinese medicine. And then the second way that we diagnose is through the pulse. And there's 3 different pulse positions on each wrist. There's actually 9 different pulses that you can take in your body, but most acupuncturists do the wrist. And it's really important that if I give someone a formula, I know that it's not going to affect. For instance, if we gave somebody a formula for tonifying the heart, maybe they have heart palpitations because they've got some weakness in the heart that needs to be more structured. But in the formula, it also affects the spleen. And your spleen happens to be weak too. And now I'm giving you a formula that's helping your heart, but it's harming your spleen.
Wow.
And so if there's a patient that's doing this over the counter, you can get into a lot of trouble in that way. Now, with single herbs in your backyard, it's a little different, because number one, you're not eating them in capsule forms. For example, I took, before I became a practitioner, I found out that cayenne pepper will help you with bronchitis. And so I started taking copious amounts of cayenne pepper in pill form, and it harmed my heart. It was too much heat for my heart, and it started giving me weird, different rhythm of my heart. And so I harmed myself by using one herb and not having a practitioner. So I really want to make sure that people are very, very careful with Chinese herbs. I would recommend that you find a good acupuncturist nearby and you go to her or him and say, these are my symptoms. I like this herb. If you really want to get into herbs, can you tell me why or why not this herb or this herbal formula would be good for me? Or what herbs do you recommend? And then you take that herb and you reverse engineer it and you go learn about that. That's a way to be empowered, but you're not endangering yourself.
I love that. I love that. And I really want this to be a cautionary tale for people who are starting out with this because, you hear all of the things like, what herb can I take to take away estrogen and like all these kinds of things. And it's like, first of all, it's individualized for every single person, like you just had listed all the things why. But more importantly, there may be something going on that you don't know and you're just treating this one thing. And so I love that cautionary tale. And then my next question would be, excuse me, you talk about the connection, excuse me, you talk about the connection of homesteading and mental illness or mental well-being. Well, I like that better than illness. And the connection there being, we talked about it a little bit, but just to get more clarity of it, what does that define?
I love talking about this because as an acupuncturist, I've always looked to my specialty as treating patients with anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. Those were the folks' stress-related illnesses, which is really almost all illnesses, right? You don't suddenly get ill from having a fantastic life. Usually your cortisol levels are off. I mean, because we live in a world where the treadmill is insane. Like the way that our lifestyle is now is not healthy. Like most people just doing the normal stuff that normal people do, that is not the normal way the body is supposed to live.
Right.
It's not. And so when we talk about homesteading, some of the ways that we create glowing mental health is by doing a number of things, again, accidentally. For example, when you're making that baked chicken for the first time, you are creating a sense of empowerment. You're also doing a mindfulness practice for your family or friends that you're cooking this meal for. I know that everyone out there has been to a home-cooked meal by a grandma or an aunt or a best friend or their favorite neighbor down the street, and their food is like nobody else's food.
Right.
And it's not the ingredients, it's their love that's going into it. And there's something that's changing. I think that we'll eventually be able to see that in scientific terms. But for right now, it's just love that's going into it. Well, that woman or man that is doing that cooking, they are also oftentimes having a mindful meditation while they're cooking.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm cooking my food, I'm thinking about what it's going to do for my body, what it's going to do for my family's bodies. And that really helps me combat the feelings of hopelessness. Another thing that we see a lot in this day and age is anxiety. Sometimes it's low-level, non-specific anxiety. You're just not able to chill out. And I believe that the prescription to anxiety is action.
Mm.
So what I see is when I go out into my garden and I stick my hands in the soil, you talk a bit about grounding. When I try to do barefoot. If I have mulch, I don't do barefoot because it's a little splintery. But if I'm on my grass, I've got my feet barefoot and I've got my hands in the soil. And there are microbes in the soil that are actually going to help your body reset your nervous system. And then the ions are changing. So you're doing a number of things, but just the action of getting your hands in the soil. Now, with that being said, I do know I'm acknowledging that there are many people like myself that lived in studios with, a windowsill and no yard, or now I'm living in the suburbs and I have a tiny yard or a rural area. And I touch on that in the book because it is different. There are different techniques that you need to do, but there are ways that you can very cheaply get your hands in the soil. If you go to the supermarket and you buy a basil plant, a little tiny potted basil plant in the supermarket at the garden store and put it on your windowsill, you are now homesteading. Congratulations, you are a homesteader.
There you go.
And clip that off, throw it in your water for some like spa water. But there are other ways that you can reverse engineer. For example, in big cities, there's a lot of little tiny dirt patches next to stairway stoops. Like in New York City and a lot of them are just dirt, like no one's using them. You can go knock on your neighbor's door and say, hey, that ugly plot, you don't want to say that it's
You want to get a yes.
Yeah, don't
want to
offend
get a
them.
no.
Don't be like, this podcast lady told me to tell you your fly is really
It's
hitting.
really ugly.
No, you want to go and say, hi, I see you have some land here and I would love to grow herbs here. It'll make it pretty and I will share half of the produce with you.
Yeah.
And who wouldn't, like, if somebody knocked on my door and said, I'd like to make your house prettier, I'd be like, yes, please. So that's one way that you can do it. Another way, if you're in the suburbs and let's say you're still renting, but you're in the suburbs and people have fruit trees, if you see an orange tree with rotten oranges at the bottom of it, go knock on their door and say, I'd love to harvest these oranges for you. Why don't we split it? Or why don't we do a third to charity, a third to you, and a third to me?
Yeah.
A lot of people would be so grateful because, like you and I, and like our listeners, we're too busy to do all this stuff. So you can find ways to homestead without having land, without having money, and you can even do it without having time, as I mentioned before, with the, washing your dishes and educating yourself.
No, I love that. I love everything that you're saying. And again, we talk about those small actionable habits that you can build upon. And I think too, quite interestingly, we like you were talking about the treadmill and we're on this rat race and these things, but some of this almost forces us to stop for a minute and sort of be present in what we're doing, whether that is the little plot or growing the little mint out of the windowsill or whatever it is. It's making us just focus on that and sort of keep everything else out. And you talk about this treadmill, and I think a lot of it has to do with, electronics and how we're so much more connected and everything. And we talk about a lot of times the just being in the sun and the vitamin D that is so nutritious for us. And of course, not burning yourself to a pulp, but just being out there and your hands in the soil and things like that. I know I was going to mention this with my first, I had this, older gentleman as a doctor. And the very first thing he told me to do was make sure I went and put the baby in the dirt. Right. And I don't think they tell people that anymore, but apparently that was a big thing because the baby, even if it got in the fingernails or the baby ate some of the dirt, and again, we're talking back when the soil was not depleted and good for you, it would automatically give the baby sort of these immune and gut stuff and all this kind of stuff. Now you wouldn't, gosh, could you imagine?
No, our first nephew in my family, it was like you had to be sprayed down with aerosol before you touched them because that's what we were taught. This was before I was a holistic practitioner and there was hand gel everywhere. And this was before hand gel was a big deal. He's like 30 now, but it was this, we need to make it as sterile as possible. And yet we have, old world folks that are saying, get your kid outside in the fresh air. It's even a good idea to just open up on a good clear day, open up your windows and get some of the healthy microbes in your house because you don't want to be just, dust is really your skin. Yuck. You don't want to be just constantly sniffing your skin. You need to get other happy.
Or put plants in your house or things like all of those things we can be doing. And like you said, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. But these little things that you're doing start to create this different, kind of mindset practice. And I think that's amazing. And then, so my last question would be in regards to homesteading and, you dealt with this chronic illness, which that was a lot of diagnoses that you gave. Where would you put, how important it is for you to put gratitude in that mix? Do you give yourself a gratitude journal? I say this all the time. I do not journal. I can't. I absolutely hate it. Just the act of writing, I just absolutely cannot do. So I find other ways to, I speak it or I, listen to it or something like that. But I feel like that actually does give me some sort of neuron somewhere that I'm being grateful,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. Everybody has a different way. My husband's not much of a journaler. I love to read and write. That's just what I do. So I love this question because just like I said, the prescription for anxiety is oftentimes action. The prescription for hopelessness is oftentimes gratitude. And I didn't know that in my 20s because I was definitely more lower mood states. Remember I told you I went on antibiotics right after 28 years. I was so depressed immediately upon them. And it was like a fascinating experiment because now I'm a grown up and I know that this is not what my body typically does. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so what do? I went and I bought a yoga pass, $29 for all the yoga you can eat, right? And so I went for 30 days. I just went to yoga every single day, 2 days a week. 2 times in a day. And it did help as I was eating yogurt and fermented foods, I was also doing this community practice and movement. And so, okay, to get back to gratitude, I don't write a gratitude list, but I do a few things. I will often leave my husband notes about what I'm grateful for him about. I try to thank him at least 3 times a day.
I love
Because I think we forget how incredible our partners are and the people around us are. And sometimes I even notice that I'm very grateful to service folks, but I'm not then, also giving that courtesy to my husband because he's always here, right? And so I have made a practice probably in the last 6 months to thank him. And so sometimes I'll put a Post-it on the bathroom wall. And it has increased our happiness in our marriage because
I love that
we are more. I love it too. It's not mine. It was from Laura Doyle, who wrote The Empowered Wife. It's an incredible book. And so I started doing that. And then what I do for myself, I don't write gratitude lists often unless I'm annoyed. If I'm annoyed at someone, then I might write, I'd say, I drop and give me 10. So I drop and I write down 10 things, or I'll call a friend and I'll be like, all right, I'm mad at so-and-so and I'm going to drop and give you 10. And I'm going to give you 10 reasons, 10 things to be grateful for. And it doesn't change whatever the conversation I may need to have.
Sure.
But it does shift me out of the black and white tribalism.
Sure.
They're bad and I'm good. No, they're actually quite good too. We just had a bump in the road.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I do for gratitude, you got me started on gratitude.
I love it. I love it.
The last one, but this one is one of my favorites, is in the morning I do a morning meditation. And the first thing that I do in that meditation is on my back in my bed, I just think about and list things I'm grateful for. And so it almost always starts with, I'm grateful for this comfortable bed. And I'm grateful that I have heat and air conditioning. And I'm grateful for if I had a bath the night before. I'm grateful for running water and hot water. And I'm not trying to be like, I live a privileged life and, this is what all first world people should do. It's really just, what am I grateful for in that moment?
Yeah.
And when I do that, I'm waking up in a gratitude state.
And it sort of sets the tone for your day.
It sets the tone. And it's easy to be grateful. I don't care where you are. It is easy to be grateful because if you're listening to this, then you have electronics where you can, communicate with anyone around the world. That's something to be grateful for. You can also be grateful for Sarah's fantastic mic. That sounds so crisp and clear. Like, who doesn't like a host that you can hear well? So there's lots of things you can be grateful for.
Oh, that's so funny. Okay, so then just to kind of come full circle and everything, which I've absolutely loved every little nugget that you have, not little, just the wonderful wisdom that you've brought to the show. But talk a little bit about the Create Wellness Project and how you help people.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you for those compliments, because it's really fun to meet like-minded people and have a genuine conversation. It's really, it's one of my favorite things to do. I didn't realize I would like podcast guesting as much as I do, but you get to meet some fantastic people. So Create Wellness Project is in the works. I'm currently creating online classes. The first is going to be how to make kefir because, hello, I love kefir.
Wait, how did you say it though? How is it correctly pronounced?
It's supposed to be pronounced kefir.
Kefir. Okay.
And I don't say it that way because then I mix it up. Then I call it kefir. I just mix it up. But
insult the whole thing.
That's right. That's the correct way. The incorrect way is the way that I'm saying it, which is kefir. Okay. Which is what most people say in America. And then I have my Homesteading Mindset book, which helps busy people tackle the overwhelm of creating sustainable, healthy lifestyles through the implementation of small daily tasks. And that is a big part of why I'm here today. I just want people to know that it is possible to make incredible life changes with tiny little tasks. And I have a gift for your audience.
Oh,
Sarah.
Yeah, please share.
So if you are interested in creating habits, I have the Homesteader Habit Tracker, which is, you could use this habit tracker for anything, but it also gives you a few steps on how to make habits doable and not bite off more than you can chew, not make it a Magic Monday, make it actually something that's accessible to you. And you can get to that at my website, which is createwellnessproject.com/gift, GIFT. And this has been such a pleasure, Sarah. Thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it so much. And then your book, is it on Amazon or can they buy it off your website?
It's on Amazon or anywhere you can buy books.
Okay. And then how far out are you from your first episode for your podcast?
Oh, I'm so far out.
Oh,
I have 5 Post-its, speaking of Post-its, on my bedroom door. And the first one, podcast was number 1 for a while. And now I really think it's important to get this course out. And then I think I'll be doing podcasts, and then I'll be calling you frantically and going, Sarah, tell me how you do this. And I don't know what I'm doing.
No,
Okay,
please
good.
do. I love it. I love seeing the podcaster community. I've said this before. They are the most kind people that I've ever met. And they are not, at least the people that I've come encountered with, they're not stepping on you. They're pulling you along for the journey. And so I just want to pay that forward because that's what was done to me. So absolutely, we'll help you with that. Elizabeth, this has been amazing. I so enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for sticking around. I know we're way over time. So I appreciate it. And maybe we can have you back after you do start some of that stuff and kind of get a little deeper into the more particular things of it.
I'd love that, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to Everything's Messy podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you'd hop on over to wherever you listen to your favorite podcast and hit that like, subscribe, or leave a review. And hey, feel free to drop a messy comment too. You can always find me on social media, Instagram at Everything's Messy Wellness, Facebook at Everything's Messy, and X, formerly Twitter, at Everything's Mess. If your email's your thing, reach out at sarah@everythingsmessy.com. Be sure to check out the brand new website at www.everythingsmessywellness.com. If you're ready to take messy action in your life and need a little help, I'd love to connect for a breakthrough session. And if you're living with type 1 diabetes like I am or caring for someone who is, let's chat. We'll turn messy moments into momentum and keep moving forward. Thanks again for listening to Everything's Messy podcast, and as always, keep it messy.